Don't lift your Toyota Tacoma until you take these things into account. You could be very disappointed. Well, good afternoon everybody, and welcome back to Robmotive. And that's right, don't lift your Toyota Tacoma until you take these things into account. We're gonna get into it, but before we do, if you haven't before, maybe you've just been hanging around, you didn't think of it, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and click that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. Well, we're down here in South Texas. It is a gorgeous day today. Right now it is 77 degrees, pretty strong winds. Hopefully they're not picking up on the camera. Bright sunshine. It's a gorgeous day. So let's talk about what you should take into account before you lift the Toyota Tacoma. You know, my goal in lifting mine was to make it level. That was the whole purpose, as well as raising it up a little bit, right? So I could put some bigger tires on. But there's a few things that I considered, and fortunately I thought of this before I did it, before I actually pulled the trigger and decided height, or what height I wanted. What I'm talking about is, if you're gonna add anything to your Toyota Tacoma, you need to account for that, or those, so that you can get the right angles and level that you want in the end. So let's run through it. We're gonna start in the back. First of all, if you're gonna put anything back there, obviously it's gonna have some weight to it, right? It's gonna pull down the back end of the truck. So when you're looking at doing a lift, you want to account for that. Now, what kind of things am I talking about? Well, first of all, a tent. For you off-road campers out there, a tent can weigh as much as, what, 600-700 pounds, maybe more. Obviously, if you put that on the back of the truck, it's gonna push it down a little bit. A sport bar. I have a sport bar on mine. This thing weighs, rounding up a little bit, right about 100 pounds. I also have a bed mat in there. That weighs about, I'm thinking it's somewhere in the 50-pound range, something like that, maybe a little bit less. But anyway, that's about 150 pounds of weight. What about a replacement bumper? You know, this really depends on what you go with. If you go aluminum, it's gonna be lighter. If you go steel, it's gonna be heavier. Nonetheless, you're gonna add weight there as well. Of course, hauling. If you're gonna be hauling stuff frequently in the back of your Tacoma, you're gonna be looking at it while it's sitting like this if you don't pay attention to how much weight you think you're gonna be hauling around. Next up, even heavier tire, like a spare tire. They weigh more than the stock tires do typically, and every little bit counts when you add it all up. Now, let's move on to the front. On the front, if you're gonna add an aftermarket bumper, which a lot of folks are doing, again, you can go steel, you can go aluminum, but you're gonna add anywhere from probably 50, 75 pounds on up to maybe even high as a couple of 100 pounds. And what if you put a winch in there? You know, they're not light. They're probably a good 100 or more pounds themselves. So potentially you could be adding 200 to 300 pounds of weight in the front of the truck. And again, that's gonna pull the front end of the truck down. So what I suggest doing is do not lift the truck right away. Don't do it until you account for these things. Go ahead, put what you're gonna put on the truck. In other words, if you're gonna add a tent, a sport bar, maybe a bed mat, if it's only a bed mat, that really shouldn't make much difference, but the other things will. Go ahead, get everything put on the truck, and then start looking at what kind of a lift you're gonna purchase, what you're gonna have installed. That will help you determine what kind of height setting you need to have that lift on, particularly if you're going with an adjustable shock, which is what I did in the front of my truck. Now, what I did, I only lifted the front of the truck. I left the rear stock because Toyota, when they build the Tacoma or assemble it, it comes with a rake in the front. It's gonna be pointing down somewhat, right? So when I lifted the front, I didn't want to go ahead and do it before I put my sport bar and my bed mat in there, because if I did, my rear end was going to be down even further, something that I didn't want. I wanted the truck to be level when I did that. So I went ahead, I put the sport bar on, I put the bed mat in, and then I measured what I was left with. Now, as far as measuring, there's two different lines of thought to do that. A lot of people will measure from the center of the wheel to the top of the bottom, rather, of the wheel well. That's how they come up with their measurement. I prefer to have the truck set on a level surface like I do now, and this is important. Make sure that your surface is level so that you get an accurate measurement. But I set mine in here on the garage, which is level, and I measure from the floor up to the bottom of the fender well. I did that in the front, I did that in the back, and that's how I came up with the distance that I wanted to raise the truck in the front. And it was reduced. I didn't have to go necessarily as high in the front to level it out as I would have if I'd have just left the back stock. In other words, not putting anything in the back to kind of lower it down a little bit to get rid of that difference between the two, if you will. Think of it as sitting on a pivot point, kind of going like this. You put weight in the back, it's going to do this a little bit. It's going to pull the back down a little bit. It's not that it's going to pop the front up, but the back is going to go down a little, and you're not going to want to raise the front quite as much as you would have, because maybe it's like this instead of like this. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's what I did. I calculated how much I actually would need to have the front raised to level the truck out with the extra weight that I had put in the back. You know, it's funny, I've had a few comments on the web about that. People have said that they've gotten a lift and they were disappointed because it's not level, or the front was still pointing down, if you will. And that's probably because they didn't take into account what they've got in the back or what they're doing with the truck. Now, to accommodate that, I think the best way to go is with adjustable shocks. Because if you go with just a block and spacer type lift, well, they're set heights. They're not going to change. And I also have found that there aren't a lot of different increments in the spacing or the height of the blocks and the spacers that you can get. Because I had looked and I found that I could not get a spacer that would give me the right height that I wanted to get as close to level as I could. One little thing I want to mention, my truck is not perfectly level. You're never going to have perfectly level. It's always going to be off to some degree. But if you get it as close as possible, it should be okay. I think mine is off maybe about 1/8 or 1/4 inch, something like that, in the front. So it could be a little tad bit higher in the front to be exactly level. But the way I view this is if you can't see it with the naked eye, then you're good, you're golden. Anyway, I just wanted to get on here and say, you know, don't lift your Toyota Tacoma until you consider these things, because they are going to change the geometry of the truck. And if you're a perfectionist like I am, then you want it to be as close as possible. And don't be disappointed when you add weight to it after you've lifted the truck and it doesn't look the way that you wanted. Leave a comment. Let me know if you've run into this. Went ahead, lifted the truck, and then added your extra stuff to it, and it wasn't the way you wanted it to sit. I'd be curious to know. Also, real quick, if you didn't in the beginning, make sure you smash that subscribe button and click that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. I do have 2 additional channels. Robmotive JT, all about Jeep Gladiators and Jeep Wranglers and Jeeps in general. And Robmotive FST, all about full-size trucks, for now. Check them out, and if you're interested, why not subscribe? Thanks for watching. Stay lifted out there. Bye.